What's up, guys, and welcome back to the GN10. It's Patricia. We have just finished the men's all-around final at Bercy Arena, and we are going to recap it real quick. So, this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the men's all-around final, to stop this podcast and go watch it. And if you have, you can keep listening, and we will run it down real quick. So, Japan's streak has continued. 4 straight games where a Japanese man is on top in the men's all-around. Of course, Kohei Uchimura won in 2012 and 2016. Daiki Hashimoto won in 2020. And this year it is not Daiki. Daiki finished 6th. It's actually Shinosuke Oka. And it was an exciting final up until the very last rotation. It was not clear who was going to win. This was not a dominant win by any means. But the night started in the first rotation with the leaders, and those leaders were the 2 Chinese athletes, the 2 Japanese athletes, and the 2 Great Britain athletes. So that's Shinosuke, Bohang, Xiao, Ruotong, Sheng Bodhang, Shinosuke Oka, not Ilya Kovtun, Joe Frazier, Daiki Hashimoto, and Jake Jarman. So that was the leaders group. And in the first rotation, Shang actually had a fall on his opening 3.5 to Barani, or front tuck half. And that was not a good start. Of course, he can put up a big number there, but instead put up a 13.233. The rest of the leaders group had a great rotation to start. All, I believe, went over 14. And then they rotated to pommel horse, where disaster struck for Daiki, where he usually puts up a very strong score on pommel horse. He had a fall and ended up scoring a 12.966. And that's pretty for Zhang. The fall on floor he come back from. He still had a great floor set the rest of the way, and he has a lot of difficulties, so he kind of was able to eat it a little bit. But for Daiki, Daiki could put up a big number on pommel horse, and that fall really hurt him because he ended up only scoring a 12.966 versus like a high 14 or even a 15. And so that was pretty, out of the 2 falls, that was more detrimental. And usually, of course, Zhang was the 2021 World All-Around Champion. Daiki was the 2022 and 2023 World All-Around Champion. Daiki's was the defending Olympic All-Around Champion. So you're expecting this to be a battle between the 2 of them. But then it's kind of wide open by the second rotation. Now, of course, Zhang and Daiki have both dealt with various issues as far as injuries and stuff go in the past year, so they were kind of vulnerable from the beginning. But as the meet goes on, it's very clear that Shinosuke is being very consistent, and although he's not necessarily putting up the most, let's say, I think rings was really the one where he wasn't the strongest compared to, let's say, Sheng put up a 14.6 and then Shinosuke put up a 13.866. But because Zhang fell on floor, that even those things kind of out. So as we move on into the rotation, all the guys are putting up strong numbers. Partway through the competition, it was actually the Ukrainians on top, Ilya Kovtun and Oleg Vernayev. And it was feeling very reminiscent of 2016 with Oleg being up there. He was leading the competition. The crowd was loving it. He was hamming it up. Of course, for Oleg, he ended up finishing 8th. But for Oleg, after being the 2016 silver medalist in the all-around and the 2016 Olympic champion on parallel bars, he was banned for doping for a while and missed the Tokyo Games. And then, of course, originally his sentence would have kept him from competing in the 2024 Games, and essentially probably he would have retired. But after going to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, that sentence was reduced, and he was able to return to competition last year. And so for him to come back and, have, such an exciting performance, was, that's a big story, and the crowd was loving it. And again, Oleg's a character, so he was hamming it up. But the next rotation was high bar, and Oleg is not the best at high bar. He ended up putting up a 12.7. Ilya was doing better, but just still was they're both at a difficulty deficit compared to the Chinese and Japanese. And so by, The final rotation, it's very clear that it's, Ilya was going to floor. He could have snuck onto the podium, but it was pretty clear that it was going to be a mix of, was it going to be Xiao? Was it going to be Zhang? Was it going to be Shinasuk? It was all going to be dependent on high bar, and they all hit high bar. They all hit high bar well. I believe it was Zhao went up first. He went 14.366, which was better than team final when he actually had a mistake on his dismount. That was part of the reason China ended up falling to Japan and winning the silver instead of the gold. Of course, Uede went after him and fell twice, so that was also part of it, but it all contributed. And then Shinasuk went up, and he put up a 14.5, and essentially, obviously, I think Sheng had to have like a 14.8 or something to surpass him. And when he dismounted high bar, he seemed to think that he did. Honestly, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, he did? Like, because Zheng put up a 15 plus in qualifying, like it was nothing. And the routine wasn't bad, but I think it was on like the Czech Giant or something along those lines where it looked like very tedious, and there were a couple of other small things, and it wasn't that like qualifying routine where he did go 15 plus. But in the moment, you're just like, you're wrapped up into it, and even he was like, I've got this. But he did not have it. So Zhang ended up putting up a 14.633 and was 0.233 behind Shinasuk. So the new men's Olympic all-around champion is Shinasuk Oka from Japan. That makes it 4 straight for Japan. He put up an 86.832, and then you have Sheng in second with an 86.599, and Xiao Ruotung in third with an 86.364. Of course, Xiao was the Tokyo 2020 all-around silver medalist, and he's been through a lot these past few years, dealing with a lot of injuries. So for him to come back and make his return and still make the all-around podium, even though he wasn't even necessarily looking like he would potentially make the all-around podium earlier this week, like during qualifying or team final, is very impressive. And then of course Ilya Kovtun finishing right off the podium in fourth in a heartbreaking finish. I feel like the fourth place finishers the past couple of games have been so close, and then of course it's just so far away. You're still not winning that medal, but he put in an incredible performance, honestly, across the board. He ended up finishing with a 14.7 on floor to close out the night. Rounding out the top 5 was Joe Frazier from Great Britain. He had a great set on high bar, 14.266, and of course the 2019 world champion put up a 14.933 on parallel bars. Daiki was 6th, then it was Jake Jarman, Oleg in 8th. Christopher Mesros from Hungary was 9th, and Matteo Giubilini was 10th from Switzerland. For the Americans finished 14th and 15th, with Paul Judah being the best American in this final. He finished 14th. He leaves Paris. He has no more finals. Of course, he finishes his games in Paris with hitting 16 out of 16 routines, many of those obviously for the team, many of those in the leadoff position, and then tonight coming in and hitting another 6 routines to finish within the top 15 in the world. Fred Richard was clearly a bit gassed, and he said as much afterwards, but it seems like these guys really, gave it their all for that team bronze medal, which obviously was the main goal coming here. But he fell on horse in the first rotation, and then he ended up falling on a pass on floor, and so he was not able to repeat his amazingly impressive bronze from Worlds last fall. If you're wondering about everybody's favorite Filipino, Carlos Yulo, he finished 12th. It wasn't necessarily his night as well. He fell on pommel horse, had a really hard fall actually, but seems okay. I saw him doing interviews outside of the arena as I was leaving. Casimir Schmidt, I believe, finishes the highest ever finish for a Dutch men's all-around gymnast in 13th, so kudos to him. Going down the leaderboard, Felix Dolce actually had a terrible time on high bar. His grip broke, I believe, in his first go around on high bar, and it was quite the scary fall. He was slow to get up, and the whole arena was definitely very invested in this. And then because there's a rule basically that if it's not of the gymnast's fault, but like equipment error or something like that, like a grip breaking, the gymnast can go again. And so he was able to go again. Unfortunately, he did have a mistake and then a fall on the redo, and so just wasn't his night. But he finishes 20th, and the crowd was really, really behind him, just rooting him on. That was probably one of the loudest moments of the night, them getting behind him and motivating him to finish that routine after just everything did not go his way. But so that is kind of the recap of the men's all-around final. Tomorrow we of course have the big one, the women's all-around final. We've got Simone, we've got Rebecca, we've got Suni, we've got Kalia, and of course a whole slew of amazing gymnasts. It should be a very exciting meet. We're looking forward to watching it unfold and then recapping it with you tomorrow night. So talk then.